Good afternoon from Broken Head, Northern Rivers of Australia. Broken Head is just south of Byron. It's some beautiful surf beaches, and as you can see, the tide's pretty high today. I've stopped at some rocks because I can't walk and climb wet rocks at the same time. Also, I can't talk and climb wet rocks at the same time. And so best wishes to my family and friends and everybody else in New Zealand with the 3 earthquakes. We're now all setting up on top of the hills on the East Coast, hoping they don't get a tsunami. Very high tides here today. And as I talk about some health and stuff today and some cryptocurrency information, I'll give you a little bit of tour of Broken Head, the beach line. So as usual today, the talk will be on my 2 foundational principles. First one is that true health comes from living life in harmony with nature's rhythm, as consistent with the Gaia theory, which states that all living organisms and their inorganic surroundings have evolved together as a single living system. Also consistent with the statement by neuroscientist Carl Friston that the anatomy of any organism must contain within it a model of the environment in which it's immersed, which means that the universe is made up of fractal patterns, which means that we are part of the universe and the universe is part of us. And the second foundational principle, of course, is that Bitcoin is part of the peaceful revolution. It is money for the people, by the people. And today I'm going to talk about 3 medical studies out this week, which are going to include discussions on iodine and selenium and their role in the thyroid, intestinal worms and the immune system, and mitochondria and their role in autoimmune disease. And I'm also going to talk about some of the security concerns with Bitcoin. Could it disappear? Could the wallets that we store it in be hacked? So if you're interested in any of that, keep watching. Hold on for the musical break while I get over some of these rocks. Alright, that's a little bit safer to walk. Alright, so what are we going to talk about first? Let's talk about, we'll just start with mitochondria. Why not? We have a quadrillion of them in our body, as you know, and they used to be ancient bacteria. Now, the problem is, and those bacteria now live in a symbiotic relationship with us, which is great. But originally, if you're going to incorporate bacteria into an organism, there's going to be an immune response. So what we did to protect us from an immune response from our relationship with these bacteria, so the relationship is symbiotic, not pathogenic, was to cover them in lots of lipid layers. And what we've discovered in research this week is that if those mitochondria get damaged, and mitochondria, because there's a quadrillion of them, always get damaged. If they get damaged, they leak some of the proteins from the bacteria into the cytoplasm of the cell. And then that cell starts reacting against those proteins from mitochondria now dumped into the cytoplasm of the cell. And that can precipitate an autoimmune-like reaction based around interferon. And they found that if they protected the mitochondria or they stopped the interferon, then the autoimmune attack was turned off. So the important lesson there is to keep the mitochondria really healthy. And the best way of doing that, the simplest way of doing that, is to make sure we get good sleep. Because that sleep is when our brain and our body cleans out the mitochondria through melatonin. And the melatonin does most of its work between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. because we all run on a circadian rhythm set by the light cycles. All organisms do, even bacteria, even plants, we all have a circadian rhythm. And that melatonin is released at night by not only our pineal gland, but also the mitochondria themselves. The chloroplasts in plants release melatonin. So melatonin is ubiquitous and up there with vitamin D and sunlight and its miraculous healing potential. So getting good sleep, and the way to get good sleep and make sure you release that melatonin from 10 to 2 is by seeing the sunrise in the morning and making sure that you don't get exposed to artificial light at night through your skin or your eyes. So I've replaced my lighting with red and circadian lights, and I wear blue light blocking glasses otherwise to make sure I maintain and optimize my melatonin levels, so I clean out those damaged mitochondria so I don't get an immune reaction. Now I'm just about to head up the hill, but as you can see, I'm here with some of the famous pandanus trees. They're all around this area, and the local people, and I think you can see a pandanus fruit here somewhere. Let's see before, you might be able to see it above me. There it is, pandanus fruit up there, which the local people called breadfruit, and used to consume it as a food. But when you look at how they used to prepare it so it was edible, it was a lot of time and effort. And I think that's one of the problems with our diet now, is we all expect to just eat instantaneously absorbable and food, whereas traditionally we have had a lot of medicinal foods which have required much preparation before we eat it. And by that preparation, we've made the food much safer to eat. By taking shortcuts, by not preparing it properly, or by having highly processed foods, we're missing a lot of the medicine from food, and we're also doing damage to our gut, which probably brings me on to the second discussion as I walk up this hill about intestinal worms and the immune system. Now, I have a lot of experience with intestinal worms, not personally, well I probably do, but not that I know about, because I take precautions. But I had a lot of experience with them on my 50-acre permaculture farm, which I looked after for 6 years a few years ago. And I had goats and alpacas, and they were really predisposed to a worm called barber's pole worm. And they were so at risk of it that if I didn't notice that, and good morning, afternoon, if I didn't notice that an alpaca was getting a bit sick and didn't worm it promptly, it would probably be dead within 24 hours. Even if I did worm it, I had to keep really on top of it. Goats were a little bit hardier, but even then, 2 days they would be dead. And they died from just up at the lookout now. You can see the coastline that way, and behind me you can see the Three Sisters, famous rocks around here. And out here was unfortunately where some of our brave servicemen in World War II had an emergency landing in a aeroplane, at night, and unfortunately none of them survived. So there's a memorial here for them. So yes, intestinal worms, they would die within 48 hours, and they would die from blood loss because the worms would cause microscopic bleeding. And worms don't do that to us so much, although we can lose blood from them. But what they do is they inflame the gut wall, and when the gut wall gets inflamed, then we start leaking toxins and bacteria from the gut into the bloodstream. Now, the microbiome is really good for us, and every organ has their own microbiome, but that's good for that organ, not necessarily another one. So the gut microbiome is really good for the gut, but it's not good if that gut microbiome gets into the lungs, which has its own unique microbiome. And it's sure as hell not very good if it gets into our brain. And we used to kind of call that leaky gut, but now we call it dysregulation of the intestinal epithelium with translocation of the microbiome. So you want to keep each organ in its own special area, each organ's microbiome specific for that thing, and not let it get translocated to another area of the body. And when you get intestinal worms, you get translocation of that microbiome through damage to the gut wall, and that can precipitate autoimmune reactions, and it can also decrease our immune system. So that was a study recently which we found that people who were treated with ivermectin for intestinal worms had a much better immune system and much more resistant to viral illnesses. So keeping our body free of intestinal worms, either with medication or natural anti-worming agents regularly, is a good idea for me. And the third study I want to talk about, well, there's two, as you can see up there. You can get a better view of Three Sisters. All right, I can walk a bit faster now. That's the hill I used to do hill sprints on. I used to come out there and do hill sprints up and down there. Now I come out here and do yoga and meditation. So life changes us a little bit as we go through different stages of life, and that's nice to recognize. Okay, walking back through the bush to the surf beach. So iodine and selenium, so they're both what's called halogens, and halogens are very important for functioning of the thyroid gland. Iodine is used to actually make thyroid hormone T4. Thyroxine is made up of a protein called tyrosine with 4 iodines on it. T3 is tyrosine with 3 iodines on it, 1 iodine is removed. So iodine is actually used to make thyroid hormone. Selenium is very important as well for the thyroid gland, reducing inflammation. The study today or this week showed that selenium was very important for reducing thyroid antibodies in Hashimoto's and Graves' disease. And it's interesting that iodine and selenium, as you know from my previous videos, are both very antiviral minerals. And we also know that persistent Epstein-Barr virus is a common cause of thyroid inflammation. So it may be that yes, iodine and selenium are good for the thyroid, but it also may be that they are helping by stimulating the immune system and preventing persistent viral infections in the thyroid gland. All right, so what have we talked about? We've talked about the mitochondria and making sure we clean out dysfunctional ones by getting good sleep and making sure our melatonin levels are optimal. We've talked about keeping ourselves free of worms to make sure that we don't get translocation of the microbiome and decrease our immune system. And we've talked about how important iodine and selenium are. You can see the famous surf beach, Broken Head Surf Beach behind me, and that's, can't really see, but I can do it. Look at that, that's where the Byron Bay Lighthouse is out there, which we might do a video from maybe next week. So selenium and iodine, particularly good for the thyroid. I get my selenium from Brazil nuts and seafood, and I get my iodine from seaweed that I often collect from around this area, from seaweed. Lastly, Bitcoin, the people's revolution, the peaceful revolution and the people's revolution. So people often say to me, well, what happens if the internet gets switched off? Well, every transaction of the blockchain for Bitcoin is recorded on computers scattered around the world. So as long as the computers survive, there's a record of the blockchain, and you only need one computer to survive because all of the translocations and all the ledgers are recorded on each computer. Well, what happens if the internet gets switched off? Well, if the internet gets switched off, you'll still have your Bitcoin when it gets switched back on again. And the fact that you can't access your Bitcoin when there's no internet around the world is going to be the least of our problems, because you're also not going to be able to access running water, toilet paper, food, electricity, and getting food and water is going to be much more important than locating your cryptocurrency Bitcoin, which will be there when the internet comes back on. And if the internet doesn't come back on, we're going back to the days where you have to go and find your food in pandanus trees and learn how to prepare it yourself and hunt and fish. So as I said, the fact that you can't access Bitcoin will be less of a problem than accessing food and water. And what about storage and wallets, the cold and hard wallets? Well, the thing to remember there is that your cryptocurrencies and your Bitcoin are not stored in a wallet. They are stored on the blockchain. All the wallet does, the wallet is like the secret pirate's treasure map, which allows you to access where you have buried your Bitcoin on the blockchain. So as long as you don't lose, you can never lose your cryptographically stored Bitcoin on the blockchain, as long as the blockchain survives. But you can lose your secret pirate's map to get to your buried treasure. So what's the key? Don't lose them. Well, in fact, you can actually, I'm going to take that back, because you can actually lose your wallet, because often wallets are stored on the phone. But every wallet comes with a seed phrase, which is 12 or 24 words, which you use to open up that secret treasure map. So as long as you don't lose your 12 or 24 seed phrase, you can get another phone, download the same wallet, put in your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, and you're back with your secret treasure map with X marks the spot along the little dotted lines that we used to do when we were kids. So you can actually physically lose the wallet stored on your phone or a USB stick, as long as you don't lose the 12 or 24 word seed phrase, which allows you to access your cryptocurrencies. In fact, that's how some people say they can move around their world with all of their Bitcoin just stored in their brain, because they get to a new country, they buy a phone and they download their old wallet with their seed phrase. That relies on us remembering 12 or 24 words in our brain, and I've got a very good brain, but I'm just not that trusting in my brain that it can remember 24 words in perfect order. So that's not the way to secure my phrases. So yes, I don't think we have to worry about the internet disappearing, and I don't think you have to worry about losing your wallet, as long as you don't lose your seed phrases. So thanks for watching. It's been an amazing walk through Broken Head. I'm off to get some sun on the beach, and peace and love, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye from Broken Head.